All right, thank you so much for staying with us here on the Bottom Line KE. Time for our conversation tonight. In the next about 40 minutes or 30, we'll be having this conversation, trying to make sense of the events that have been happening in the country. And the recent one has been the dialogue talks between Azimio coalition and the Kenya Kwanza side. Now, joining me for this conversation, I have Dan Kegode. Thank you so much, Dan, for making time for this conversation tonight.
Amwai.
All right, I also have Mary Ariviza, who is also joining us for this conversation. Like we're talking behind the scenes, we're saying I haven't had you on set this year. How are you, Mary?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you so much for making time for this conversation tonight. All right, we want to start with making sense of the state of affairs right now as we speak. The talks between Azimio and the Kenya Kwanza side are expected to kick off tomorrow at the Bomas of Kenya. There's been so much push and pull between, from both sides in regards to these particular talks. Let me start with you, Dan. Are they likely to bear any fruit? Because there's been different arguments from different quarters that we might not see anything out of this conversation. They'll just collapse like the first one. Are we likely to see any difference in these conversations?
The expectations from the different camps are different. Bear in mind that the political interest of the Kenya Kwanza and the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Alliance are very different expectations. But initially, if you look back at the trajectory that was building up, Kenya Kwanza was saying there are no talks. Azimio was saying there will be talks. Now, if you get it that now we are at a brim whereby there has been an agreement that let us hold a talk, I truly believe that there should be a trajectory. Even though we cannot be able to achieve the 100% expectation of both camps, but there should be an outcome at the end of the discussions. If there is a genuine interest for both camps. Okay. Yes.
Mary, do we believe both sides are, have genuine interest to have these particular talks and get to the bottom of this particular conversation once and for all? Are we likely to see a good outcome? Because within 30 days, if nothing happens, the Azimio coalition says now we will resort to, resuming protest.
I had a lot of hope until when I saw the majority leader of parliament and in Nyoro today say that there is nothing they are going to do because of the differences of what my brother Kegode has talked about, that there is a difference. Each group is giving different lists. And you cannot hold a meeting that is successful unless you know the agenda. So I think the first thing is for both groups to sit down and not look at the interest of Azimio, not look interest of Kenya Kwanza, but to look at the interest of the Kenyans. There are issues that are of interest to Kenyans, and by the extension you can see the world, the Kenya, while the whole country has been on protests where people have lost their lives, and it's important that we know that life is sacred and that the country must move, but it can also not move without proper mechanisms in place that are being respected. And by this I mean the constitution, the laid down procedures, the rule of law, and so on. And I think it is 1 Kings chapter 12, where there is a story of Rehoboam. Rehoboam, I'm a Christian, and I know the majority of these people in this country are Christians. It's important for us to know there is nothing that happens under the sun that has never happened before. Rehoboam was supposed to succeed King Solomon after King Solomon had died. And the Israelites sent elders to King Rehoboam to be, and said, we don't mind you being our king, but your father laid too many taxes on us. He constructed palaces and so on. We want you to ease us from a lot of taxation. And he consulted his younger friends, his age mates, and the age mates said, these guys are joking with you. Tell them we are going even to make it even harder. The taxes even will be more. And that is how the kingdom of Israel was divided into two. So as people go on the table, it's important for them to think about the unity of the country, because we need to know that the 2010 Constitution was supposed to be bringing out issues that were of marginalization. And in this 21st century, I don't think the Kenyans who are there, and especially the young people, who are the majority, who are jobless, who are graduates. So, you know, we have got one of the most educated lot in the continent. They are not going to sit down and just see leaders who are not really thinking about them, but their personal interests. Okay,
so what should be then the most important thing that should be forming these conversations? What, when they are going to the table, because they've presented different issues and we'll be getting into that, but what is it that the people on the ground need addressed more from where you sit?
From where I sit is, I was in the Bomas making constitution from the time of Yashpal Gai until when we inaugurated it in 2010. And we have it, the preamble says, we are making these constitutions for ourselves, for our children and our children's children. Kenya is not for some people who are there for 5 years in office. Now, whether they went in legally or illegally, that is immaterial. The thing is, Kenya does not belong to leaders who are given the mandate by the people who elect them. Kenya belongs to the Kenyan citizenry. And it is important that whatever we do, we must think of the generations to come. And so, as the majority leader of parliament, it's very unfortunate when the talks are starting tomorrow, when he comes up and says that there is nothing like we have our list, and some of the things that have been said by the azimio la umoja are irrelevant and they will not be, then it just beats the whole thing from the word go. It's important for them to say, can we sit down and even start making the list of what we think is important, not for us, but for Kenyans.
Okay. Now, let me come to you, Dan, because from what Mary is saying, we did hear the leader of majority saying some of the issues that the azimio has raised. Number one is the issue of to do with the cost of living. But according to the government, that is not a conversation on the table, because there are already measures in place to make sure that they do reduce the cost of living, citing fertilizer, subsidized fertilizer rather. And, you know, the bumpy harvest, quote unquote, that is expected to be happening anytime soon. And they say, your issue number one is not a subject that we are going to be engaging in. So already there's division in regards to what should actually be forming the basis of the conversation. When you hear this, what does this actually get to mean to you and to the country itself?
I think you did get it right. In most of the occasions in the legal framework, any case that it's before a court of law, it remains debatable in any other given forum, especially if those who are on that given table to debate it for the second time are part and parcel of the interest at the courts of law. If you can get back what the president said when he was in Taita Taveta, said that this is a case that is before the Court of Appeal, and several rulings have been made before. I think is Judge Majanja. So there's some rulings that have been made before. So I think it will be fair enough for us to give the court system an opportunity to air its legal capacity or legal opinion towards what has been tabled by Azimio la Umoja, because Okio Mtata is part of Azimio la Umoja. So you cannot present a case in court at the same time you bring it an agenda at the dialogue table.
That is not a part of the Azimio coalition. He's an independent candidate. But this is the thing. Let's go back to the conversation in regards to the cost of living. You know, we are not touching on the Finance Act, but the cost of living itself, how that should be reduced. Because I believe from both sides, it was like, if you come with the ways that you think we can handle the issue of the cost of living, then we are willing to listen to that. Why are you dismissing that? That is the subject of debate when it comes to the cost of living, not the Finance Act itself.
If you look back to how we finance our own budget, that's how we are running a government itself. There are two ways: internal raising of funds, external raising of funds, internal borrowing, external borrowing. And in most cases, most government doesn't really go to internal borrowing because you will crippleize the economy itself internally. So they prefer go for external borrowing. The past regime exhausted and reached the limit, the debt ceiling, that the law could enable us to be able to borrow.
Okay.
So we cannot take it as an opportunity to go and borrow again externally. Now, which other factor or input we have for us to get funds is taxation. And then who do we tax? Do we tax the angels? No. We tax the citizens. But the modalities in which the azimio and the media has propagated the finance bill in this particular pretext, the taxation, there's a lot of misinformation in the public. In that we have not really educated our people on what is being taxed and what is not being taxed. Let me give an example.
Yeah.
If you go right now to our common markets, if you ask 3 months ago, what was the cost of gas, 6 kg, as you compare today, the 6 kg. Now, what is the reason why the cost of sugar has increased? Is it because of taxes? No. It is because of the inadequacy of the commodity in the market. And today, if I'm right to quote it out, the cabinet had approved we may be able to source sugar outside the country in that we be able to fill the gap that is remaining out of the local production. So the issue on the table is, where did the problem begin? We can only solve this issue of cost of living if we understand where that problem began. And I can say it clearly on air, the problem began during the past regime.
Okay.
That's where the problem began. But if today, we cannot solve it today out of thoughts, out of sky. We can only solve it in quarters, in space, and in time. And that's why I always say to Amwai, that if we ever listen to what the Prime Cabinet Secretary ever says about economy, since his time of campaign before forming the Kenya Kwanza government, some of his ideas are being implemented strategically. We can't be able to recover everything today, tomorrow in the morning. He always says it will take us 2 years. So Kenyans, let us be patient. We give it time, and everything will happen.
Living something that should be discussed in this country right now as we speak.
It should be discussed, but in reference to the length of time to be given in terms of being able to lower the cost of living. It needs time. Don't wake up in the morning and reduce the cost.
Okay, I believe interventions need to be put in place, but are we from how we look at things? Because instead of things getting any better or being stagnated to one particular point, you're seeing things getting worse. The price of sugar at this particular moment, just like you're mentioning, it's 2 kg goes to 520. That's too expensive.
It is expensive, but I've told you one thing. Do we just wake up in the morning and reduce the cost of sugar? People talk about being able to create subsidies, but these subsidies, you cannot subsidize consumption. The best way to subsidize a commodity is you subsidize at production. Look what has happened with the issue of unga. The president promised that the price will come down. Look at the harvest around. Why? We had subsidized production.
But even
so for us to be able to achieve the issue of sugar also,
this unga, we are still giving it time. We are not even sure whether we are going to buy it at 150 because it's not even there.
We shall buy it at 150. Look at what is awaiting.
Initially, we were told that we would buy it at 150, and there's some unga that we saw in the market 159. Then disappeared as soon as it came out. We have
I can give it this way, Amwai. If we want to be able to understand this thing, substitution of production does not happen overnight. At the very, very beginning of everything, there was planting. All the farming inputs were subsidized. A reduction of fertilizer price from 7,000 shillings to 2,500 shillings. If you can and get some of the things locally back home, people are waiting for bumper harvest.
All right, we'll get back to you. In terms of subsidizing fertilizer, yes, we've seen that, but
secondly,
something different. Let me come to you, Mary.
Can I pop in something?
Yep.
I think you're popping the question at an already group that has determined itself to do the right thing. Kenya is the most taxed country in the world, yet we are nowhere economically near anybody. I think the problem we as citizens of this country are facing is not even being overtaxed. Today in the news, when I'm just seated where I'm seated, it's just passed there, that Parliament is saying that almost all the parastatals are being run down. Corruption is rampant. You are finding that one tribe is ruling the whole parastate. It's never supposed to be like that. And this is in disregard to the constitution that was made in 2010, because there was supposed to be equity, and every parastatal in this country is supposed to have the face of Kenya. But our topmost president, RUTO, started it off by just appointing the ambassadors. Over 3/4 are Kalenjins, and I can say this without mincing my word. So when people go to these parastatals who are also predominantly Kalenjins and a few Kikuyus, you'll find that the people there are just running like their own personal village, kiosk. And it's very, very unfortunate, because I think this regime is taking us back to more than 1970 in this country. So we are overtaxed. And when you see people talk the way our brother is talking here, or even the government, or Ndindi Nyoro, who is the majority leader, talk the way they do, is they are not in touch with the Kenyan people. People are suffering. People are suffering. Some of them even don't know that some of us are no longer. You meet them and, oh, Mheshimiwa, please just give me 200, I go and buy some unga. And you see from what you are saying, which is true, is that they cannot even be able to buy 2 kilos of unga. So it's no longer living from hand to mouth. It's actually literally Kenyans are living in very dangerous situations. They have no food. So it's very important that the first thing that needs to be done is we must make sure we are detribalizing the country, and especially institutions. You cannot have a higher education institution being run 99%, as it has been said in Parliament today, by one ethnic group. It is very sad, because I am a professional personally and a lecturer of psychology. And once that is done in any institution, that is an institution that is as good as dead. Because that is where young people come in, and that's where we should be able to teach them as lecturers how to be good Kenyans, how to have equity and justice. And so when they come there and they find that all their lecturers from morning to evening are from their tribe, and in the process, by the way, it means even the people that will be chosen in to come in and to take various courses will be from those ethnic areas, then we are losing it as a nation. So the first thing is we must make sure that corruption and nepotism is done away with, and it should start, the way you have said you are starting from bottom up, it should start from the top, so that we see it in example to the bottom. Because Kenyans are really suffering and there is no food. Secondly, this thing of subsidy of fertilizer, I do not know. I come from the basket, the green basket of this country, Trans Nzoia, and I don't know what was subsidized, and the maize are doing very poor. One, we did also not have rain on time, and so the government cannot just wish that because it is harvest time. You know, August should be harvest time in September. But I'm telling you, in that Trans Nzoia area, I think the harvest will be done in October and November, very unfortunately, because the rains did not come on time. And so people are suffering. And as we talk about the maize coming, the sugar industry, because of corruption, has made it impossible. And talking about the last regime, who was the deputy president? Presidency was there. He saw, we cannot say that it just looks like if there was any problem in that regime, it is just going on.
Let me throw this.
Let me come into you, Amwai,
before you do that. So the leader of majority, I think, Mary confused a little bit. The leader of majority in the National Assembly is Kimani Ichung'wah.
Thank you.
Ndindi Nyoro is the chair of the budget committee. Yes. But before you come in, let me just throw this to Mary. In this conversation that is happening in the country right now, is the cost of living justified to be tabled as one of the issues that needs to be addressed?
It is the main thing.
Okay.
Kenyans are suffering.
All right.
Kenyans cannot afford food on the table. And so as we talk about our bigness, being in big offices, being in charge and everything, in fact, I've visited Kampala in the recent past. One of the things, as we talk, President Museveni has done is to make sure Kampala is almost a bicycle city. Sorry, I have to say it, but it is that. And the reason is he has zero-rated all motorcycles. And so every Ugandan is able to put something on the table. It's very interesting. You need to know that oil that passes through Kenya to Uganda is cheaper in Uganda than it is cheaper. Than it is in Kenya. So the thing is, it is a hungry man is an angry man.
Okay.
So it's important that Kenyans have food on the table. Secondly, we need our children to go to school, and the free primary education that had been started by President Kibaki in 2002 must not be shelved. Help must be left to run as help so that it helps bright students who are in the university. We must make sure our country is running towards the front, not backwards.
All right. Let me come to you, Dan. You wanted to jump in.
Just to try to correct some misconception in my elder sister Mary. One, the cost of oil is something which is affected from the world perspective.
Okay.
The cost of oil, the increase the cost of oil does not happen at Kipevu in Mombasa. It happens at the point of its own source. Secondly, currently right now in East Africa, Tanzania also are going through the same problem we're going through in terms of oil. Last week, the government in Tanzania increased the cost of oil. She needs also to input that in all her facts presented today on the show, because Kenyans are watching us. They need to get facts, not stories. When we speak about Ugandans being able to run their country on motorbikes, even Kenyans who have motorbikes, and Kenyans are using it border means, and our boys are doing their work. That's why we say, kazi ni kazi. Now, let's come back to the real issue. You asked me about the question. Does the cost of living should be an agenda on the table tomorrow? I'll say it this way. If they withdraw the case at the court, then it should be an agenda on the table. If they don't withdraw the case at the court, there should be an agenda on the table.
Who is they?
Azimio.
Because the case is for an individual who has taken it to the court,
who affiliates
who
affiliates himself
as
I think to be fair to Okiya Omtata, there's a time when he was tabling this, he said he had initially that he had actually gotten funding and also support from some members of the Kenya Kwanza to actually go, take this to the to the courts rather.
That's politics. That's politics.
Well,
that's politics.
He is not a member of the Azimio coalition, at least that's what we know for facts.
But for us to be able to table it as an agenda on the table, let us use the legal framework or use the political framework.
I think
because even the Law Society of Kenya has gone to court with the same.
You had said
yes,
very
that's what I'm saying. We either go for legal framework or a political framework. We can't use the two at the same time.
Right.
You had said it at the beginning, and you had differentiated between the cost of living and the bill. Those are two different things. If these guys go to Bomas and they started discussing the bill, then the cost of living had just happened to be a subset of that bill. But it is not, they're not going there. I don't think I've seen Azimio Kenya saying they're going to discuss the bill. They are discussing the cost of living. And the cost of living in this country cannot be suspended until when our courts probably will make a ruling next year or sometime. It has to be now because Kenyans are in dire needs of right thing. And this is because my brother is talking about that all the other countries have got the same. They have not added essential commodities. They don't go to a restaurant and the VAT is there. They don't buy everything and it has gone up.
You quoted oil.
But
you quoted
as
oil.
a good Kenyan, I wouldn't have minded if I can pay tax and I go to hospitals, I find medicine. I go to schools and my children are going on with the free primary education and the free secondary education, and the help is not being encroached on. I wouldn't have had a problem if NHIF is also running very well. The corruption around the institutions in this country it's alarming. So I was in New York one time, and I took a bus called Greyhound, and I traveled from New York to Birmingham, Alabama. I did not mean hit a pothole on the road. Those guys
we
pay
have a long
tax.
way to get there.
They pay tax.
Let's go to cost of living.
They pay tax.
We
I
are
am
cost of
bringing
living.
in.
Now we
They
are the
pay
cost of
tax,
living.
but the tax works for them.
Okay.
In this country, we are paying with our salaries, our everything 50%. Or even almost 60% of our salaries are going to tax, plus when you put it on food. And then it lands in somebody's pocket. And as we agreed at our church, we are going to sack some people.
Okay. All right, done.
I was coming. Let us try to stick to the real thing, Amwai. For us to speak about the cost of living, this is the issue of taxation. True or false, Amwai?
True.
True. So if we are speaking about the cost of living, and we want to separate the cost of living for the finance bill, then we're discussing a different thing. So that's what we are saying. If on the table the agenda is cost of living.
So this conversation.
Let me come in. If an agenda of cost of living is supposed to be on the table, then let the political framework take its course. But if we still stick to the legal framework, then we are losing it. So this is what I'm trying to say. Cost of living is a worldwide thing, is a global thing, everywhere in the world. We are still experiencing the post-corona effects up to today. Economies are still recovering. There are some companies which closed down sometimes back. That's the reality of life. So we are not going just to sum up everything today, that this government is corrupt, this government has done this, this government is doing this. No,
well,
let us stick to what is important. And the important thing is, what is the makeup of the cost of living? And I can say it proudly and very effective this evening. It is the finance bill. So if we're going to discuss about the cost of living,
should this conversation then happen after the courts have already made a ruling on the Finance Act?
The cost of living agenda should be tabled tomorrow. The table. Wait for the outcome of the court.
Then what is the point of Kenyans feeling represented in this particular conversation? Because that is one thing that unites the country. When they say we will discuss issues to do with the cost of living, because it is paining you, that is one thing that Kenyans can identify with. A lot of Kenyans don't want to know, in regards to maybe the reconstitution of the IBC Commission. That might come later on. But right now, Amama Mboga somewhere, Brian Amwai somewhere, young man somewhere needs to understand from this conversation, am I going to see a reduction in the price of sugar, the price of flour, the price of rice? Am I going to be able to travel from here to work without having to pay an extra coin when it comes to fare? I think that is what unites the country. And when the country rallies behind these politicians and says, you're going to have a conversation, let's listen to what you have, they need something that is going to come out of there to be directly touching on them. So if it is not tabled, then where's the place of the common Kenyan in this conversation?
The cost of living issue has been politicized. That's number one. Has been politicized. Number two, the past regime was solving the cost of living issue by subsidizing consumption. But this regime is handling the cost of living issue by subsidizing production.
Okay.
So the effects, the process could be long out of the approach of the government. The process could be long. But what we want to achieve in the long run, we want to achieve affordable production. That's number one. Listen to me, Amwai. Affordable production. That's number one. If you have affordable production, it means that that person at the base, bottom up, at the bottom, is able to afford a bag of fertilizer in the market. We are sure that even the half an acre, the quarter of an acre in the uplands of this country can be cultivated. When each household is
We value your feedback and welcome your complaints about our programming and operations.